Well, good evening, everybody. It's great to be here. Thank you for the warm welcome. I just want to start off by talking about what I like to talk about first. I'll try to do this every year, is the travels I've had this year to go out and see you and see the work that you're doing. As you know, I travel much of the year, crossing the country, meeting with land trust staff, boards, and supporters. And it really is the best part of my job, is being able to get out into the field and see the incredible places that you've conserved. In the past 12 months, I've experienced firsthand the wonderful lands protected by the Arizona Land and Water Trust, Para la Naturaleza in Puerto Rico, Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust. Congratulations, Eric. Also the Palmer Land Trust right here in Colorado. Western Reserve Land Conservancy in Ohio, and the Prickly Pear Land Trust in Montana. I loved my time with all of you. And I've also had the chance to visit with the staff and the supporters of the Westchester Land Trust in New York, Save Mount Diablo. Ted, I just saw you. New Jersey Conservation Foundation, I can get that straight. The John Muir Land Trust in California, Teton Regional Land Trust in Idaho, the San Juan Preservation Trust in Washington State, the Piedmont Environmental Council in Virginia, and land trust members of the Texas Land Trust Council. So again, thank you all for the warm welcome and the time that you gave me when I came to visit. You may recall from my remarks last year that my plan is to share with you the best sign that I've encountered in my previous year of travel. My spouse, Elena, captured a series of signs during a hike this summer as we visited the San Juan Islands in Washington State, just after we enjoyed two great events with the San Juan Preservation Trust. The series begins with two signs communicating a landowner's clear desire to be left alone, with an unmistakable message of keep out. The third sign is the one that matters. Exactly. So clearly, different from the first two, this one is friendly and adds an important condition. Keep out, unless you have something we're both passionate about, and it opens the door to interaction and communication. Now, I'll return to this theme in just a minute, but first I want to acknowledge what a difference a year makes. When I stood before you on October 28th of last year, we were 12 days away from Election Day. What happened on November 8th was unexpected for many of us, and since that time, we have been endlessly buffeted by incredible changes and challenges, including both political and literal hurricanes and firestorms. The fact is, the world has fundamentally changed in the last year, and we find ourselves in uncharted waters. I owe it to you to reflect on where we as a community fit and where we go from here. As land conservation practitioners, do we need to alter our aspirations or perhaps just our tactics? How do we maintain our sense of efficacy, our hope and optimism, and the confidence that what we really do matters and makes a difference? The fact is that the events of the last 12 months have been profoundly unsettling, distressing, and unprecedented. And I suspect that if it weren't for these bright lights, I'd see nodding heads in this audience from people who voted for different presidential candidates. Because what we're dealing with today isn't just about who sits in the White House. Those adjectives that I just mentioned, unsettling, distressing, and unprecedented, apply to a broad range of things that we now must cope with. So tonight, I want to focus on the general state of our national politics and our ability to get along as Americans. So we've all seen leading up to the election and since the inauguration, the polarization and vitriol have been off the charts. On each side of the political divide, people are classifying various portions of the populace as the other, individuals that they believe cannot be trusted or engaged in rational debate. an atmosphere that makes it more difficult than ever to reach a consensus about core American values and priorities. This certainly manifests itself when it comes to the environment. Environmental protection has once again become intensely politicized, including the return, or the prominent return, I should say, of the jobs versus environment debate, as well as an intense anti-regulatory zeal. We see daily stories and headlines about federal environmental rules, regulations, and aspirations being discarded or rolled back. Given these political realities, what then is my tactical assessment of where we stand as a community? Now, you may find this surprising, but I believe we're in really good shape. How could I possibly say that? Well, for starters, our work fully embraces private property rights and empowers private landowners to voluntarily decide the fate of their lands. Battles that continue to rage around public lands, while disheartening, should not impact our ability to advance conservation, and could even work to our advantage, given that we offer a means to conserve land without expanding government land holdings. Second, our work is powered by charitable donations of interests and land, resulting in protection in perpetuity. What's not to like or respect about that? And most importantly, our work is nonpartisan, and we know how to cultivate and maintain our relationships with allies on both sides of the aisle. We have champions on Capitol Hill that are prominent Democrats and Republicans ready to go to bat for us. Of course, even with all of these things going for us, we do have some tough political battles ahead. We face a small number of people still packaging and promoting transactions in which investors profit off the donation of conservation easements on land held for only a short period of time. We still face an IRS that is hostile to conservation easement amendments and persecutes well-intentioned donors. We still face political headwinds when it comes to securing the millions of dollars that we need for land conservation in the Farm Bill, the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and other legislative vehicles. And we still face an emerging tax reform agenda that we must influence to protect incentives for the donation of land and easements. We must also work to prevent changes to the tax code that intentionally or unintentionally lead to a reduction in monetary donations to charitable organizations like land trusts. But let me be clear, I am confident that we will prevail in each of these policy arenas if we stick together as a community, get past any perceived differences, and exercise our collective political power. The Alliance's top-notch government relations team and our communications staff are working day and night on all of these issues to ensure that your voices are heard when policymakers are in Washington and when they return home to their voters. All of you, of course, are instrumental in this effort by showing policymakers the fantastic local conservation work that you are doing, and then drawing a direct connection between that work and federal policies. So with all that said, I still think we need to ask the question, will it be enough for our community to adroitly maneuver through Congress and the federal bureaucracy to protect our interests and advance our agenda? Isn't the permanence of our conservation work dependent on a renewed consensus that environmental protection writ large is essential? Likewise, aren't the lands and waters we conserve dependent on large, healthy ecosystems that are preserved in significant part by our nation's bedrock environmental laws? We urgently need to build this awareness and consensus among our fellow citizens. But to get back to a national dialogue about protecting the environment, we first need to get back to having any sort of national dialogue. In short, the events of this past year have made abundantly clear that we need to engage in fundamental work as Americans to discover again what we have in common and find a way forward based on shared values. New York Times columnist David Brooks published a piece in late August in which he lamented our national crisis of solidarity. characterized by what he called rising racial bitterness, pervasive distrust, and political dysfunction. He posed the question, what might bring us back together? His answer, the land. As he laid out his argument, Brooks acknowledged what we all know, that Americans experience and relate to land in different ways, but in the end, they come to associate land with their core values. And it takes only one more logical step for them to conclude that the conservation of lands helps preserve those values. Rally attendees in Minneapolis last year heard my remarks and know that I firmly believe that land is the answer to so many things that ail us in society. So you won't be surprised that I also believe that land conservation, and land trusts can play an important role in helping bridge our political divide. If we as Americans are to rediscover common cause and regain trust in our fellow citizens, it must begin at the local level. The more that people interact one-on-one and focus on a shared, agreed upon purpose, the more they discover each other's humanity and map a path forward together. In short, mutual toleration and trust require shared experience, something that is so often missing in our modern world. And what activity brings people together better than land conservation through the work of land trusts? Literally and figuratively, we help people find common ground. And as they get outside and together, they see, touch, smell, and protect what is real and what is beautiful, they come together. In her new book, What I Found in 1,000 Towns, a traveling musician's guide to rebuilding America's communities, the singer Dar Williams provides a number of examples of how this phenomenon has occurred across the US. She emphasizes the importance of what she calls positive proximity, a state of being where living side by side with other people and interacting with them despite apparent differences generates all kinds of beneficial results. And she makes a point to emphasize how this falls squarely in the wheelhouse of local land conservationists. She writes, "No matter what your town has to offer, even a little natural beauty defines our sense of place, and that is fertile ground for positive proximity. Clearing a small trail, planting some flowers in or around public places, and otherwise finding natural spaces for gatherings or solitude can remind us of why we live where we do, even if one neighbor has a National Rifle Association bumper sticker and another keeps a dog-eared copy of Edward Abbey's The Monkey Wrench Gang on their nightstand at all times. Our natural surroundings, especially those we work together to preserve and celebrate, remind us of why we stay and how our common ground allows us to transcend differences with our neighbors." Now, if that's not enough to persuade you, allow me to invoke something that I know you are all passionate about, which is the Yeti cooler. As you can see, this image accompanied a New York Times article from a month ago under the title, "Can a $300 cooler unite America?" The answer, by the way, was a resounding yes. But take a closer look at the image. What does it communicate? It says that everyone loves to be outside connecting with the land, camping, fishing, sunbathing, barbecuing, tailgating, and even accepting a helpful hand from Yeti himself. What is the image's core message? Love of land is universal and can bring us all together. So let's capitalize on that love to bridge our political differences and not just keep our beer cold. Now, to get serious again, I want to stress that I am not Pollyannish or naive about the ability of land conservation to heal today's political rifts. I fully realize the true differences in people's day-to-day realities, their media diets, and their deeply held beliefs. I expect our current political environment, and the prioritization of other issues over the environment to persist for some time. Nevertheless, I challenge all of us to examine how we can use our local land conservation work to help reunify our neighbors and our nation. If Thin Mints and Yeti coolers can bring people together, so can the protection of land. Land where people take in nature's beauty for inspiration and recreation, land to go hunt and fish, and land to produce our nation's food and fiber. Now, in closing, I want to share with you a few words that I think might help you, keep you inspired as you go about your work. I suspect that most of us over the past year have turned to our favorite trusted authors to make sense of our changing and challenging world. I know I have, and I note a recent remarkable book by David Orr, counselor to the college president and professor emeritus at Oberlin College. It's entitled Dangerous Years. I have always found David's writings helpful in making sense of the myriad environmental challenges we face and how we can best tackle them. There is a sober realism bordering on pessimism that comes through in his latest book. But he also provides an example of how we can move forward and make a difference. Specifically, he describes the Oberlin Project, an intense, comprehensive effort to transform the small town of Oberlin, Ohio, into a model of community sustainability and vitality. Only through painstaking community outreach and hard work did a shared vision emerge and come to fruition. He sums up the project as follows. It is an exercise in applied hope based on a commitment to make the world more fair and decent while preserving a beautiful and livable earth. Let me repeat that. It is an exercise in applied hope based on a commitment to make the world more fair and decent while preserving a beautiful and livable earth. When I read that sentence, it struck me as the perfect summation of the work that land trusts are doing in communities across the nation. And that work is perfectly calibrated for the world we live in today, and in particular, the state of our national mood and politics. This is one of those times where local is where the action is, and no one does local better than you and your land trusts. This is our moment to not only promote land conservation through our work, but to heal our larger society. Let us measure our successes not just in acres protected, but also in conversations started, fences mended, and friendships made. Together, we not only serve communities, but we actually build communities, planting the seeds for a nation to regain its ability to articulate and advance shared values, starting with a steadfast love of the land. In today's divided world, perhaps there's no more impactful role for land trusts and the work that we all do. Thank you, and good night.